What's up, football fans? Welcome to a Thursday episode of the Call Sheet Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Smith. Today, going to take a little different angle on the great game of football. I had an excellent guest on yesterday, Garrett Lucas, head football coach at Rancocas Valley High School, and we talked scheme. And today, we're going to look at the game of football from the perspective of a journalist and somebody who covers this excellent game. And with me is football columnist for South Jersey Glory Days, the host of the South Jersey Football Frenzy, and the president of the Touchdown Club of Southern New Jersey, Mark Trible. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me on, man. I'm happy to be here.
I just told Mark before we went on the air that it's kind of cool. We're switching roles here. Mark's interviewed me a bunch of times. Now I get to interview Mark. But I wanted to bring him on because Mark has become one of the best known journalists in our area in terms of covering the game of football, does a wonderful service for the young men who play this game. And I'm really interested to get his thoughts on why has this been rewarding for him to cover the great game of football. Before we get into that, though, Mark, tell us about your background. How did you arrive in this current role?
Yeah, Kevin, I'm originally from Virginia. I grew up there. And in about 2014, I took a job working in Vineland, New Jersey at the Daily Journal newspaper. The next year, I transitioned over to the Courier Post in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And one of the beats, of course, as you well know, everybody at those papers at that time, small staffs, right, was covering football. So I was, I've been a football fan my whole life, high school sports fan my whole life. And South Jersey, it just hooked me as soon as I started covering ball. And I eventually left the paper, went to work in a different domain, but couldn't kick the football itch. I'm back every fall, freelancing and doing whatever I can to be involved. So, I was fortunate to be put in a place that is just an absolute hotbed for great high school football. And it is something that's always been a passion of mine.
Well, you're right about that. We're going to talk about that a little bit further along in the show, how South Jersey football in particular has really taken off. But let me start with this. What do you like best about covering, whether it's high school football in general? What really motivates you and you find enjoyment in as far as that's concerned?
I think it's a couple of things, Kevin. I think first off, football in general, it really, in my opinion, is kind of the last vestige of Americana, right? You got the band, you got the popcorn, you got the concession stand, the cheerleaders, the whole thing. Everybody comes together for this event, right? And no matter how you vote, or no matter what you do outside, or what denomination you are, you're sitting on the same side of the bleachers. You're pulling for your team. So always love that aspect of sports in general, but football once a week. I mean, it's an event more so than some other sports where there are so many different games and occasions. Football is just kind of that rallying thing. It only happens, for some high schools, it's 10 weeks a year. You just get 10 games, 5 home games, maybe more if you're lucky, where everybody comes out and supports a local kid. So football in general, I love everything about it. I've loved watching the evolution of the game, the schemes, individual players, the coaching, the NFL draft, the college side. All of it is wonderful. For high school, I think the access that you get, being around the kids. I used to always get questions if I wanted to cover the Eagles, who I love. And I always said, no, I don't want to do that, because you don't get to stand on the sidelines at the games. Like, you don't get to meet the coaches and get to know them like I've gotten to know you over the years and others, and see kids grow up and meet their parents and kind of just take it all in. Like, that's something that really has been a joy, and that it gives me goosebumps every Friday night or Saturday morning. It still never fails.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because South Jersey is predominantly smaller towns, smaller communities. You get a lot of places where football on a Friday night there still really means something. I mean, Ocean City, where I've been coaching for over 30 years, when I was 22 years old and just starting out, some of the people that were front and center in those stands are still there now that I'm 55 years old, like, and they're still yelling at us, but,
Exactly.
but their heart's in the right place, but they love it. They care about it. It means something to them. Here's something else that means something. You've become known pretty well throughout our area as the Hat Man, right?
Yeah.
You've got this sort of special award that you give at the end of games that you're covering, where you do your kind of your hats off. How did that originate? Where's that come from?
Well, Kevin, I've actually got the hat here for anybody who's watching. It is here. It's always nearby. I got this hat years ago, back when I was still living in Virginia, for a Halloween party. It was the night Alabama and LSU were playing. They were 1-2. So it was that great big game in Death Valley. They ended up playing in the national championship as well. I think the game was like 9-6 in overtime. It was a defensive struggle, but I dressed, of course, as Bear Bryant for this party, and I like stopped at a Sears and bought this hat. And when I went to the party, I got a lot of people asking me, oh, you're a reporter. And I said, yeah. But they thought that was my costume and that was my job. And I thought, no, I'm dressed as Bear Bryant. And none of these people had any idea who Bear Bryant was at the party. It was not a football party. But I thought, people recognize the fedora and they automatically assume it's a journalist. So I would wear it out. And when I'd go to sporting events or other events, people would automatically come up to you. And if they had a scoop or they had something they wanted to comment on in the local news or whatever was going on, they'd talk to you. They knew you were the reporter. So when I transitioned up to New Jersey, I still, same shtick. I wore the hat. And my editor at the time, a close friend of mine who's still with the Courier Post, Tom McGurk, he's the guy who hired me in the first place and brought me to Jersey. He said, you ought to just give it to the best player of the game afterwards. And I thought, okay, that's cool. So we did it. And at the time, I was covering some real, like, for lack of a better phrase, some real B-roll games. They weren't great games. There was not a lot of people at these games. I think the tweets would have like 3 retweets or something. And there was a couple kids who wanted nothing to do with it. They thought it was just corny and stupid. And as time went on and I was able to gain more of a following for my coverage, then eventually you get some bigger games, you get some big players. And then it really became something where kids, I've known kids who've kind of grown up wanting to wear it after a game, where it's like this symbol of significance that you want to be the guy who wears the hat in the big game. That means you were the guy, you made the play, or you had the stat. So it's taken on a life of its own, but that's how it all started.
Yeah, it really has. You've covered a bunch of our games. We were fortunate to win some big games where you got to award one of our guys the hat. And this past year, we won our game at Battle at the Beach. And when I chose an offensive lineman to wear the hat, the team went nuts. Because they just thought like that it was such a great, first of all, they liked the award. And then for a lineman to get recognition, that was really special to them. So it really does mean something. Who are some of the better known guys that have worn the hat? Because there's some pretty big names, I'd imagine.
Yeah, number one, Jonathan Taylor. He got the hat. I think he ran for about 366 yards against Woodbury in a sectional semifinal game, and he got to wear it. Devin Leary, who was on the Ravens practice squad last year, got to wear it. We have 2 running backs that got drafted last weekend in Jacksonville, LaQuinn Allen from Millville and Bayshaw Tootin of Paulsboro. They both wore it twice. Fadil Diggs, who got drafted by New Orleans, wore it. Isaiah Rakes, who you're familiar with from St. Augustine Prep, got picked up by the Titans. He wore it twice. And then there's been a number of kids who went to, Division III, some in other sports even, who were tremendous athletes that got to wear it. And then there's kids that you go back through the list and look, and you think, I mean, there might be a kicker from Kingsway that I don't even remember necessarily too much about the kick, or if he walked up to me, I'm not sure I know him, but it was his night, and he's always going to be in the club with Jonathan Taylor and Devin Leary and these guys. So that's the other neat thing is like, if you get that designation, no one can ever take it away from you, right? Like you're in some club with those great players, and it could be you this Friday night, or your buddy, or your son, or whatever. It's always fun.
It is, and it's cool to be able to really have that association, like you just said, to somebody like a Jonathan Taylor. I mean, we're talking about one of the best football players in the world right now. And speaking of, we mentioned this at the beginning of the show, boy, South Jersey certainly had a weekend at the NFL draft. 14 young men who are South Jersey football players, either were drafted or signed undrafted free agent contracts for a relatively small area. That's an exceptional output.
Mm-hmm.
So you've had the opportunity to see a lot of these guys travel all over and see it grow over the years. What do you think is allowing South Jersey to produce so many good programs and individual players? Why has football really taken off down here?
I think it's a combination of things, Kevin. I think first and foremost, South Jersey cares about football, and there's still kids playing it. I know, people always talk about less and less kids are playing football, and that's true everywhere. It's true in South Jersey too, but there's still a lot of kids who are playing, and it's important to their communities and their families and their youth programs. They're playing from the time they're 6, 7, 8 years old, and they're playing year round. I think when you look at some of the 7-on-7s that were established, 10 or so years ago in South Jersey and in NLG, and there's another one, Slime U, down by Deptford or Woodbury area, of guys who were playing year round, severely talented players with incredible athleticism. And I think about 6 or 7 years ago, the game changed in South Jersey. The passing numbers went way up. The skill level went way up. Now we've got some big guys too, and we've got some great guys who coach year round on the line and work with these guys in the weight room. But some of the talent, I remember watching games, like Diggs, who just got drafted by New Orleans. I mean, he played tight end and defensive end. He was a Gatorade Player of the Year in New Jersey when he played for Woodrow Wilson, now East Side. And I remember watching him on Saturday, and I thought he's as good as guys I watch for some of these teams on Sunday. I mean, like one-handed catches the back of the end zone over two guys, and I'm thinking, these guys are so skilled. It's unbelievable. They continue to get healthy, develop, stick it out, get opportunities in college, and now we're seeing it. We're seeing these guys go off and make their mark. But I think there's a lot of tremendous athletic talents. There's year-round facilities, and there's dedication to it. Whereas if less people are playing football, the people who are, if they're really dedicated, have more of an opportunity, is another thought. Like North Jersey, there's a lot of kids maybe who 20 years ago would be football players. They may now be lacrosse players, I don't know, or basketball. I mean, sports specialization now is a very real thing. When the numbers go down overall, the guys who really have talent and stick it to football, they have a greater opportunity. And I think in South Jersey, we still see that football culture. We still see the dedication to it. And because we don't have as many parochial schools, we still have community-based teams and support. So I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that last point, where as the talent seems to be spread out more because you don't have those powerhouse privates like up in North Jersey where the Bergen Catholics and the Don Boscos it's so top heavy. Mm-hmm. And not as much in South Jersey. And then that's another good point too about just the development year round. I think about a guy like Lotsier Brooks from Millville, who we unfortunately got our butts kicked, by him a few times. But that kid walked in as a freshman, a very good natural athlete and a raw talent, but developed his game tremendously over the next couple of years. I'm sure just by hard work and dedication. And he's down to Alabama, and that kid's going to do. We're going to see him on Sundays. I'll be shocked if we don't.
Oh yeah, I mean, he may end up. You talked earlier about notable guys who've worn the hat. I mean, he wore it 5 times, which is more than anybody did, and he probably could have got it another 5 times. I mean, his teammates had to get some love at some point, but
right.
But this is a guy. He may end up being one of the best, And my niece goes to Alabama. My brother-in-law went to the spring game down there, and he asked me, "What's this guy that you covered?" I said, "Well, here's his number, here's his name." Well, I haven't really heard of him. He's a freshman. And then in the middle of the spring game, I get a text from him. He said, "No one can cover this guy." On Alabama. I'm like, hey, I mean, that
makes me feel good, actually, because we sure as heck couldn't cover them. Let me ask you this, Mark. Do you have any favorite memories or any moments that really stand out in your time covering football here?
There are a lot, Kevin. There are. I'm not going to mention. I will mention it briefly. One of the weirdest games I ever covered was the game you coached in that ended at halftime because of COVID. Gosh. That's the only time that will ever happen. Hopefully, I think when I think back to it, all the games I've covered, there's so many good ones. But I'll tell you the story that always sticks with me the most is actually goes back to when I was in Virginia, and I used to just cover 3 high schools in the town, and in my hometown, and one of the schools was a new school, and they made the regional semifinal, state Final Four. They had a slot receiver. And they were down by 5 points on the last play of the game. They threw a Hail Mary, and the ball was about 6 inches from the slot receiver's fingertips. Incomplete, game over, season over. The next year, they didn't have a quarterback, so they convert the slot receiver to the quarterback. And he works, as hard as he can. The guy was more of an athlete, a runner. They try to change the offense for him. The coach he's driving the coach nuts all year, but he just kept plugging away, and he really started to peak at the end of the regular season. And they make the state semifinals, and they're playing the same team. And this guy, they're winning by 10 points with 3 minutes left, and they end up going to overtime, and they get to triple overtime. They got to score to keep the game going. It's 4th and goal. The kid rolls out. It's a waggle pass option. He keeps it, and he dives for the pylon, and he's knocked out of bounds about that far away. Career over, game over, season over. And, I talked to this kid after the game, and you just don't even want to ask a question. And when a team loses, you really don't ask questions to the kids unless that's the team you're covering in the game. If you were to lose to a team I cover, I'm not going to ask your kid what happened. But if you're playing a North Jersey school, then I've got to say, what happened. And I asked this kid, take me through the, what are you feeling right now? And he said, I worked all off season. I put everything into it that I had. And every day I go in the weight room, I go work out and just say to myself, it's not going to be like last year. And he said, you know what? It was. Ooh. And I could barely, I was getting choked up, and the kid was choked up. And I thought, it was such wisdom from this kid that in football, you're not guaranteed anything. Okay. Like there's somebody at a different school, at a different campus that's working just as hard as you, looking for that extra 6 inches. And this guy, for all you wanted it for, because he'd overcome so much, and he didn't get it. And I just will never forget that. It was such a wise thing to hear from a kid. And it really is the reality of football, that you can do everything right, man, and you know it. But it can come down to one play, and sometimes your best just isn't going to take it home. There's nothing to hang your head about. You got nothing but pride, but you just come up a little bit short sometimes. That's the way the ball goes.
But that's one of the things too, though, that makes football such a phenomenal experience beyond the field. Is like, all right, that kid comes up 6 inches short again, and that is going to be hard to live with. But everything he learned to get himself into that position is going to carry with him for the rest of his life. He's going to learn work ethic. He's going to learn how to handle adversity. He's going to learn how to grind. And so there are lessons that are, I don't want to say more important, but in many ways more valuable than whether you win or lose.
Yep, 100%. And for every kid, and we get a lot in the playoffs and all this stuff of, I've seen kids in their biggest moment winning something, and the joy that it brings you.
Yeah.
And then you've seen just as many kids, the dream dies, right? And they don't win, and it hurts you just as bad. When you've seen kids play for years, and you certainly know it as a coach, but it's no different for a reporter. I mean, it hurts. There's big games, those championship games. There's an anxiety even for me of someone's going to be crushed here.
Yeah.
And someone's going to feel great. I'm happy for them, and I'm sad. I mean, it's just a very emotional time of the year, but that makes me feel alive, man, to feel that way.
Agreed. All right, I'm going to get you out of here on this. This is a first on the Call Sheet Daily here. We're gonna quote a 16th century English philosopher.
That's right. That's right.
But this is from your Twitter page, right? You have a quote on there from Sir Francis Bacon: "Silence is the virtue of fools."
Yes,
what resonates with you about that?
Well, as a philosophy major in college, that's a little bit of a Easter egg if someone happens to search it like you did. And no one has ever asked me about it through all these years, so I'm glad you did, Kevin.
It's a great quote.
It's basically a version of, it's better to be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. I don't remember who exactly said that, but it's the same type of deal. And I open my mouth and make a fool out of myself a lot, so it's a little bit hypocritical for me, but. I remember when I was studying philosophy, I just thought Francis Bacon was a fascinating character, and I agree with a lot of the stuff that he came up with. And I thought it was a great quote because it really speaks to, what are you saying? Who are you? What are you presenting? Is it better to hold it back? Is it better to let it go? It still rings true. It's a good lesson for anybody. And for Francis Bacon, I mean, this is a guy who thought, you know what? I think we can freeze food and keep it like longer. He tried it. He experimented with it. And that's how he died. I think he died of hypothermia, testing out his theory, which ended up being pretty smart. So there's a guy that, I think we can all aspire to take a lesson from Francis Bacon.
Well, keep telling the stories, Mark. You're doing a great job. You're doing a service to a lot of young men here in South Jersey. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate you having me on, man. Keep up the great work.
Yes, thank you. Great conversation. So for Mark Trible, this is Kevin Smith. This has been the Thursday episode of the Call Sheet Daily. Join me tomorrow for the final episode of the week, where we're going to talk about 5 things we learned from last weekend's NFL draft. Going to put a bow on the draft before we move on. And there's always football to talk about, man. Football never sleeps. So
That's right.
Keep joining us here at the Call Sheet Daily. Until then, have a great day, everybody.